Hej allihopa och välkomna. Ni som inte har träffat mig, Joakim heter jag, Schröder. Är präst i Svenska kyrkan San Francisco. Har varit här sedan december. Idag så har vi ett webbinarium och vi kommer att ha det på engelska. Vi har haft några webbinarier under året. Men det här är första gången som vi kan ha att man sitter i samma rum tillsammans. Och det är jätteroligt. Och samtidigt så sänds det för er där hemma på Zoom. Och där sitter någon annan person. Ja, vad kul! Hej där hemma! Och vi kommer att lägga ut det på hemsidan. För i Sverige är ju klockan typ 1 på natten. Så om det är så att man hör lite dåligt redan nu så kom gärna fram hit. Annars sitt kvar där ni sitter. This was my Swedish introduction. So and this webinar we called it Kulturafton, cultural evening. Yeah. And this day in Sweden is, we call it Valborg. In Norway, they don't know what that is, but all Swedes know what Valborg is. Yes. When we light up the woods from the winter, and the students are singing in the spring, and our Majesty has his birthday today. Congratulations, Kung Carl Gustaf. So, this event will be like 1 hour, 1 hour and 15 minutes at the most. So, this is the guests, and here we have Vendela Vida. She's an American novelist and writer, born and raised here. We'll be talking more with you later. And here we have Idunn Lohne, who has Norwegian and Swedish parents and live here for a long time as well, and studying and playing violin. And after an hour or so, we will have some Q&As in the end. So if you feel like asking or adding something to this event, think about it. And about in 1 hour, you will have a chance to ask Vendela, Idunn, or just participate in a question. So you have the chance later on, okay? And with us today should also be Nikisha Fogel, the Swedish ballerina who works at the San Francisco Ballet. But she isn't, obviously. She has to go to New York today for a surgery for her foot.
Oh, wow. Well,
that's okay, excuse, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's bad.
Yeah, so, but she sent a video here.
Hej, mitt namn är Nikisha Fogel och jag är prima ballerina med San Francisco Ballet. Tyvärr så kan jag inte vara med här idag på grund av att jag ska åka till New York för att göra en fotoperation. Jag är jättenervös inför operationen, men det kommer gå bra. Och snart så kommer jag kunna dansa igen och uppträda på War Memorial Opera House. Tyvärr är det väldigt vanligt att vara skadad när man är en professionell dansare. Det är väldigt slitande på kroppen. Men med alla situationer i livet så kan man ta med sig någonting bra och lära sig någonting utav det, vilket jag verkligen har gjort. Så att jag ser fram emot att ta nästa steg och snart vara tillbaka på scenen. Jag är född och uppvuxen i Stockholm och har alltid haft mycket dans i mitt liv. Jag har alltid velat att jag ville bli en prima ballerina. Så jag känner mig väldigt stolt att jag nu står här och kan säga att jag är det. Efter all den här tiden. Jag började på Kungliga Svenska Balettskolan när jag var 9 år och har i princip dansat varje dag sedan dess. Som sagt, jag önskar att jag hade kunnat vara med er här idag. Men jag hoppas att ni har kul och har bra diskussioner. Och att jag kan vara med nästa gång. Ha en bra dag. Hejdå!
So, are you ready for some culture?
Yes.
Great. So, we start with introducing you for the audience. We can start with you, Idunn.
Okay. Hello, my name is Idunn Lohne and I'm a violinist. I'm from Oslo, Norway, but I have a Swedish mom, which is why I'm here, I guess. And I did not actually know what Valborg was at all until a couple of days ago, but happy Valborg, I guess. I study at the Conservatory of Music in San Francisco, and I've been here for about 3 years now. Before that, I was in Pittsburgh in North Carolina, so I've been in the country studying for a while. Not sure what else to say.
Do you want to use the, should we use the microphone? I think some people are.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we should.
Okay, I can speak
It's
maybe
very
louder.
short, very short.
It's very short. So here, like this.
Okay. Anything I should repeat?
No.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I study chamber music at the conservatory, and I'm finishing my degree in about a month. So, yeah.
Nice to hear. Welcome. And Vendela.
Can you hear me? Oh, wow. I'm gonna move up a little bit.
And then even if you want to move closer, we can share this microphone.
So my name is Vendela Vida. I know many of you, so it's nice to see you. Hi, Mama. Hi. My mother is Ingrid Vida, and it's a pleasure to be in this church where I spent many years. I was seated in this church, maybe 30, oh gosh, Lisa, when was it? 36 years ago? 37 years ago. And so it's a pleasure to be back. I am here, and it's wonderful to meet you as well. We've spoken on the phone, but we have not had the pleasure of meeting in person, and it's wonderful to meet you as well. I am an author. This is my 6th book. It's a novel set in San Francisco. I also co-founded a nonprofit called 826 Valencia, which is on Valencia Street. It helps children ages 5 through 18 with their writing in particular. And for many years, I edited a magazine, a cultural magazine called The Believer, which was an arts and literary magazine.
Thank you. So today we'll talk about art, culture, literature, music, of course, and how it affects us, what it do to us, what it means to us. So I pinned down some topics to discuss, and you've seen it. So we just go with the flow and see where we end up. I have some interesting questions here, if it will not work at all. Okay. So I will start with you, Idunn. You played the violin for, you told me, like very many years.
21 years.
21 years. And how old are you?
I'm 27.
Okay. So you started when you were 6. Okay.
Good.
Yeah. And how long have you studied violin here in the US?
It's been 9 years now, almost.
Okay.
So,
So I assume you're passionate about music.
yeah, absolutely.
So what does music mean to you? Why do you love music?
I can just move a little closer. Yeah, this is okay. What does music mean to me? I mean, I play like instrumental music. There's like often no words, but I really like stories still in music. So like stories behind pieces, why they were written, like the composer's life, things like that. I think there's so many stories in music, even if there are no words. And I think also you can sort of tell a story without like the audience necessarily knowing exactly what your story. I think it's just like a nice way of expressing
Expressing yourself.
Expressing yourself or expressing the music, and it's also like sort of look into the composer's life or the time that the composer was living. It's like an interesting
Research.
something.
Yeah, yeah.
Or just like a look, like a view into the time.
And you're a performing artist, you played violin, but when you go for a concert yourself, what do you like to listen to? What gives you the most joy in music world?
I'm not sure how
Is
to-
it like Rolling Stones, or is it
Oh,
Beethoven, or
I mean, I love to go to listen to classical music, of course. I like
Please
that.
pick up the microphone.
Yeah, I love listening to classical music, of course, and I like other kinds of music as well. But I mean, I like going to the opera. I like going to see. I love German music, so I love going to see German music, and I'm not sure.
yeah?
A lot of different things.
So, and Vendela, just jump in here. What do you think? What music and art and literature? What does it mean for you?
Well, it used to mean for me, I'm an avid reader. I've always been a huge reader ever since I was very young. And I just love being taken away to another culture or hearing what other people think or believe. And I think that's an easier way to do that very quickly is through literature. You know, you can meet someone, but you don't hear their story or hear where they're coming from. Recently, I found literature to be a gateway into what other cultures are thinking a lot more. And I've recently been very obsessed with Ukrainian writers and trying to read Ukrainian novelists just to understand what the literature is like from that country and what poetry is like from that country, and to understand what people have been going through a little bit more, so I can add another layer to my interpretation of the news. And what I look for most in anything, I think, is just whether it's art or music or literature, is just kind of what you were saying, it's a story. You know, there's something even in this in music, you hear a story or there's a story of a composer's life that is coming to the forefront. And I think I just have always loved just story. Tell me a story. That's something I've always liked.
No, keep the microphone. I love to hear that. And you also have some thoughts about art and literature, not only for you personally, but for the society. Do we need art?
I definitely think we need art. That's what, otherwise, if people are not expressing themselves or not creating culture, they're not expressing something that says that we were here. This is what we were thinking about. This is what we as people were thinking about in this day, in this age. I think that it'd be very sad just have everyone else write about it in history books, but not hear about it from actual artists and musicians to see what was going on at that time period. So that for me is really fun. Even looking at literature from San Francisco from the 1970s is really interesting to me to learn what's going on in these same streets that we inhabit.
Yeah, I'm just reading now a novel from John Steinbeck, East of Eden.
Yeah.
It's really great. What do you think about
I
that?
read it a long time ago, but I think it's wonderful. Actually, I think, my mom made us listen to Charles with Charlie one time when we were driving across country. Yes, I think that was it. But East of Eden, I think that, I think Steinbeck's wonderful, especially for California, especially for someone coming from another country and really immersing yourself in California to understand what it was like, especially he writes a lot about the farmers and people in the Central Valley, which is, I think, really important part to learn about as well. Do you like it so far?
I love it.
Yeah.
When I was younger, I'm still young, I read all Steinbeck books, but the short novels, and I did love them. But I never read those full stories, like Grapes of Wrath or East of Eden. And now I'm halfway in East of Eden, and it's really addictive. And now I'm getting sad because it's only 200 pages left. So, we talk more about literature soon and about your new book.
Okay.
So, but we will still focus a little bit more on you, Idunn. And actually, we will hear you play something for us.
Yeah.
Yes.
Do you want that?
Yeah.
I'll start it now.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to play a Norwegian piece. Actually, it's the first movement from a piece by Bjarne Brustad. It was written in 1932. It's called Äventyrssuite, fairy tale suite. And I really like this piece because it's stories, like it's the whole suite is based on fairy tales. The first one is called Natuur of Livet. I don't really know. Okay, sure.
Please. Welcome, Carl and Oscar. Please have a seat. So new guests arriving to this webinar, and we're happy about that. And I hope you have a good sound sitting at home. And now Idunn will play for us. Wow.
I have a question for Idunn.
Yeah.
So no, that was beautiful. Thank you so much. And so you said it was called fairy tale? And fairy tale. So I always think when I go to the symphonies, I'm always making up stories to whatever I'm listening to, and I'm just letting my mind make up stories. But I'm wondering, when you're playing a piece like that, do you have a story in your head, or do you research a story, or is it a story, or it notes the story for you, or how does that
Good question.
how does that work?
Yeah, and that's a great question. I think I usually have a story. I like to be a little childish in this way, to like have an actual story in mind, which is why I like something like this that has a story. Like it's in the title of the piece, and you can read about the fairy tales that it's based on and things like that. And other times it can be like the story of why the piece was written, like the composer's life at the time, something like that. And sometimes there's not really anything, and then I have to come up with my own. And it can even just be like, this part of the piece sounds like something like running horses or something, and you just have like images or a story. And yeah, I definitely think I do that. And I also like to go, sometimes I go to the symphony to listen and, you know, be sort of, but other times I go to just sort of daydream, and I think that's a really nice thing to just go and think of stories.
Thank you, Idunn. It was really, wow, what a piece. And you explained why you choose that one so nice. Vendela, what does music? Do you listen to a lot of music? Does it mean something for you?
I listen to a lot of music when I'm writing, actually, but I have to, sometimes if I feel like I don't want the mood and the writing to change, I listen to the same album over and over again, like maybe 200 times. Because and I also listen a lot to Yo-Yo Ma, actually, the cellist, when I'm writing, because I just find it, I just know that his work very well at this point, because I feel like if I get very superstitious about it, actually, if I start listening to somebody else, I'm afraid the writing will change.
So you do it as a working tool?
Just to kind of keep, yeah, I know, you're sitting, when you're writing, you're spending so much time by yourself at your desk, and you just, it feels like company or something. I also get very ritualistic about writing. I have to light a candle, I have to put my music, I have to turn off my phone, I have all these things I have to do, and one of them is listening to music.
Could I?
Yeah, sure. They are allowed to ask each other questions as well.
I think that's so interesting that you're so affected by music that you change the writing. Have you noticed, like, you listen to the wrong thing and then your writing changes?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, I
That's
think
really
that's, or if you listen to, you know, I get very upset sometimes if I listen to
Spotify, or where they say, if you like this song, they start playing a song like it, but it's not at all, and then I get really upset. Like, no, I don't want a song like it. I want that song only over and over again.
And you mentioned Yo-Yo Ma. He's also one of my favorites. Do you know Yo-Yo Ma? Yeah. Do you also have a relation to Yo-Yo Ma?
Of course, I know of him. He gave a master class at my school recently. I think he's great.
He plays the cello, yeah, right. Yeah, okay. Then we're on the same page. We all know he is fantastic. Listen to this cello from Bach, Yo-Yo Ma. But now we are curious about your work, Vendela. So I would like to ask you about your latest novel.
Okay.
Can you hold it up for us?
Sure. This is the British edition, so the colors are a little bit different. Yeah.
We Run the Tides.
Yes, We Run the Tides.
And yeah, could you tell us something about this piece? I heard it was like situated in the 80s.
Yes.
Is it fiction or?
It's fiction. It takes place in San Francisco in the 1980s, and I grew up here in the 1980s. But I was always interested in people who, I guess, because I've always been interested in stories, as we're talking about stories, and I've been interested in people who make up stories. And so there's We Run the Tides is a novel of two friends, very good friends, and one of them starts making up stories that take me to a big extreme. She claims that she was kidnapped and she disappears for a while and comes back. And her best friend knows that she's lying, but no one else will believe her that her friend has actually made up this whole story. Everyone else thinks her friend is actually missing. And I was very interested in the nature of lying and storytelling and the boundaries that we push. And I think that's what made me think about that. But I made it up. There was no disappearance like that when I was growing up. I just thought it would be interesting for somebody who was trying to was inspired by Patty Hearst or wanted to be like Patty Hearst and made up her own kidnapping.
Wow, because, yeah, this is your sixth book.
Yes.
Yeah, and does it differ from your previous novels?
It differs. The previous novels, I always, location is very important to me where I set novels. So I've set novels actually in Northern Scandinavia, in Lapland. I've set novels in Turkey, in Morocco, thank you. And so this was the first one that I really set fully in San Francisco. Actually, it's not true. So a section that takes place in Capri in Italy, but primarily in San Francisco. And it differs a little bit too, that I wanted to write a book that was more humorous than other books that I'd written. And I thought an all-girls school in San Francisco in the 80s was a good canvas for humor. So that was why I chose to set a book there.
Great, and actually you promised us to read some
Okay,
things.
I'll read the opening maybe.
Yeah,
That makes the most sense, because then I don't have to explain too much. So this is the beginning of We Run the Tides. And it starts with the first person plural. The narrator is named Eulaby, and it starts with her saying, we, and then after she is kind of ostracized from her friends and shunned by her friends, the narration switches to I. But this is the very beginning when she feels that she and her friends are a we.
Do you want us to hold your microphone for you?
Oh, I can do it.
Yeah,
Okay, thank you though.
Okay, we are all here. Yeah.
We're 13, almost 14, and these streets of Seacliff are ours. We walk these streets to our school, perched high over the Pacific. We run these streets to the beaches, which are cold, windswept, full of fishermen and freaks. We know these wide streets and how they slope, how they curve toward the shore, and we know their houses. We know the towering brick house where the magician Carter the Great lived. He had a theater inside, and his dining room table rose up to a trap door. We know that Paul Kantner from Jefferson Starship lived, or maybe still does live, in the house with the long swing that hangs above the ocean. We know that the swing was for China, the daughter he had with Grace Slick. China was born the same year we were, and whenever we passed the house, we looked for China on the swing. We know the imposing salmon-colored house that had a party at which masked robbers appeared. When a female guest wouldn't relinquish her ring, they cut off her finger. We know where our school tennis instructor lives, dark blue Tudor decorated cobwebs every Halloween, where the school's dean of admissions lives, white house with black gate. Both are women, both are wives. We know where the doctors and lawyers live, and where the multi-generation San Franciscans live, the kind of people whose family names are associated with mansions and hotels in other parts of the city. And most important, because we are 13 and attend an all-girls school, we know where the boys live. We know where the tall boy with the webbed feet lives. Sometimes we watch Bill Murray movies with him and his friends at his house and marvel at the way the boys can recite all the lines, the way we know every word of The Outsiders. We know where the boy lives who breaks my necklace one day by the beach. It's a silver chain my mother gave me, and he pulls it violently and I run from him. We know where the boy lives who comes to my house the day I get a canopy bed and, mistaking it for a bunk bed, climbs up and breaks it. It's never properly fixed, and from then on, the four posts tilt west. We suspect this boy and his friends are responsible for writing in the wet cement outside our school, the Sprague School for Girls. Sprague is for girls who like to brag, the cement says. It's hard to tell if the words were traced with a finger or a stick, but the imprint is deep. We spell brag, B-R-A-G-G. Ha, we say. They don't even know how to spell the word brag. Well, and there.
Thank you. And you were actually answering one of my questions before you read. How did you come up with this idea? And you told you were interested in examine lying and things.
Yeah.
Could you say something more about that?
Yeah, so
I started researching lying a lot. Coincidentally, it was after the day after the last election, when Trump was elected president, and I started writing a nonfiction book about lying. And I started writing about researching why we lie and how we lie. And after writing about 100 pages of it, I thought it'd be much more interesting if I could make the book fiction, make it all up. And then I thought, who better to embody liars and shapeshifters than teenage girls who by their nature are changing, transitioning and shapeshifting and telling a lot of lies and seeing what they can get away with, and also figuring out at the same time who they are. They're telling lies not always maliciously, but kind of because they themselves are trying to figure out who they can be and what they can achieve. And maybe they're right. Maybe they lie about something, but they will be that person. They don't know. So
Great. And so if we read that book, we will know everything about lying. And
of course, yes.
I assume you can find it on Amazon or somewhere, or
Your local bookstore, yes.
Yeah. Or you can borrow one from
Mhm.
me.
Yeah.
No. Yeah. Idunn has a question here.
I just thought it was interesting how you said like all your books are set in like such different places, and I was wondering if you personally know all these places always, or how do you choose places to set?
That's a good question about how I know where to set a book. Sometimes I don't know. Sometimes I go to a place knowing I want to write about it. For example, I went to northern Sweden. I'd heard so much about it from my mother when I was younger, and I knew I wanted to set a book there. And I had this little pair of Sami reindeer boots that had been given to me, and they sat in my desk, and I wanted to just go and learn more about where these boots had come from. So that was a deliberate decision to go there and research the culture and the terrain. But with other books, I've gone to places and I'm just on vacation or something, and then a couple of years later, I'll be thinking of a story and think, oh, I wish I'd taken better notes when I was on that vacation, because I really think I should set my book in Turkey at this place or wherever. And so then I found myself going back to take better notes and photos. And I'm a big believer in taking photos when I'm working on something, and my photos are not photos that most people take. I don't just take pictures of like pretty views. I take pictures of things that I might need as a writer. Like when there used to be phone books, I used to take pictures of lots of pages in the phone books in a hotel room or something, because I knew as a fiction writer, I would need character names later on, and that I wanted to make sure to get the local names and have lots of options. And I take pictures of grocery stores, what's on the shelves. So if I'm writing about what the character might be eating for dinner, I know what is served there or sold in the store. So my photos are not to be recommended. They're very strange.
I have a follow-up question. Is all in the book fiction, or is it also memories from yourself that you use, or?
Yes, some memories from myself, but also a lot of it is fiction. I didn't want to look at my diaries from that time when I was writing about it, because I didn't want the story to be my story. I wanted to, so I was very careful not to look at my diaries. But I think the hardest thing is to write. It's very hard to write someone else's sense of humor. You can write what you think is funny, but it's very hard to think, oh, I don't find that funny, but maybe my character would. So that is the one thing that's very personal, is the humor is very personal.
Interesting. And I have another topic. We talked about it on the phone, and the way you become who you are. I think that's interesting for me, and maybe for everybody. The shows we make, was it like a coincidence, or was it so you two chosen your way of life, you for music and you for writing, and was there anything special, like an episode or something? In the church we call it you have a calling. You know, something really matters to you. Could you also have had such an experience, a calling from within or from God or anything? You know what I mean? You don't need to be. So I'm curious if you remember something who affected you choose this path in life. to become a writer, to become a musician?
I can answer that briefly, and then I'd love to hear what you have to say, especially if you started playing the violin at such a young age. And then I would love to hear, if you don't mind sharing your calling, because I think that would be fascinating to hear. I just know that I always loved reading books, and I think especially when you're young, you want to emulate what people do who you admire. So I would read books by writers I admired and think, I want to do that, or maybe I can do that one day. So I knew from a very young age that I wanted to write, maybe 13 or 14. And then that that's what I did all the time. And then I remember my mom could attest to this too. I used to have, when I went to college, I went to graduate school for writing. And then when I got out, I would submit my stories to magazines every week. I'd have copies of my stories, and I would send them in the mail, and you would have to send it in return postage address. And so I would have a whole little office going on where on Fridays I would send it out, and then the manuscripts would come back, usually, rejected. And then I would put them in another envelope to another publisher. And just like I had this whole cycle going on, and spent so much money on stamps. And then finally one day I got a yes.
And was it clear for you, or did you sometimes in life have a crossroad? Should I go this way or this way? Or was it just one way?
I thought at some point I should probably go to graduate school and study literature and teach literature as opposed to writing, but then I decided to keep writing. So I was very stubborn and I didn't want to give up. So yes.
So that was your answer to the strongest calling, you can say.
Yes.
You respond.
Yeah, I didn't think it was a calling. I thought it was kind of stupidity, but yeah.
Okay, we give Idunn a chance to say how it worked for you.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so I don't have musicians in my family, but I think I have musical parents, musically interested. My dad introduced me to all kinds of different music, and we used to listen to the Beatles, and he would quiz me on who was singing and things like that. And they took me to a bunch of concerts, and I don't remember this, but I've been told that they took me to a concert with and little children, Norwegian violinist. So little children were playing on stage, and I just told them that I wanted to do the same. And then 3 years later, I started playing. So I don't know, I was very young. I don't know if it was so much of a conscious decision to start this career at 6, it was just playing violin. But I think once you spend so much of your life doing something, it just makes sense. And I definitely had a period in my life that I considered other things and maybe didn't consider doing anything. I wasn't thinking much about the future.
Yeah, that was not. Did you hesitate sometime? Really?
For sure, yes.
Because it's a lot of hard work to become a violinist.
I think also.
Did you hesitate sometimes when you were? Yeah.
When I was 13, 14, I think I was a little bit sick of always having pressure, always having to be somewhere and not just be a kid. So for a while, I didn't want to play anymore, but then once I started studying, it really felt like my choice again, and I've never regretted it since then.
Thank you. You asked me, Vendela, if even I should share with my calling, of course. I think it's so interesting when you talk about culture, and if you work in the church like I do, but I think everybody has to answer this call in the life, to listen within. What is really my purpose here? What is I supposed to do according to myself? Maybe not according to my parents, to the school or the society. And sometimes it comes to conflict, your calling. So that's why I think it's an existential epic question for people to think about, because I've met so many people who regret so many years not listening to their own voice. And for me, I actually was an actor before I became a minister. So 15 years I was playing theater. And And I had two callings in my life. I still love to act and play theater. It's you know when you're on the right spot because it goes effortless. It just grows and makes you feel fine. And you know, that's my way to evaluate, am I on the right path? The calling to be a minister and work in the church was not so immediate. It was like a very, very slow process. Maybe like Slow Train Coming, Bob Dylan album. So it took me several years to find out that I had this call to work with the church, that I had something to give. So these two are still as strong for me. And it was not a cross coming into the window and said, "Repent, Joakim." It was, I had very, very strong experiences walking by myself in the nature. And so strong for me, so almost like a voice. And then I didn't have a religious language or anything. It was just so profound. And it was, I wanted to, you know, this is part of me. And I'm not alone in the nature. There's so much life. And so much hidden behind the tip of the iceberg. There's, wow. So to clothing that in a religious language took me like 20 years to put it into words of God and things like that. So I had this experience for so long with it. So language is just a tip of the iceberg for me, because these experiences, God, whatever, is so profound and hidden. So you cannot make justice to them with plain words. But we found the concept of God, 3 letters, fine. Then we know what we're talking about. And that maybe my picture, we talk about this iceberg in ourselves and in the world. So it was a slow train coming. I didn't think about that, but that's my calling. But maybe you could have some questions about this too, because I think it's, for most people, it's interesting to, which path did I follow? Which wife did I marry? Which country did I move to? And so forth. So actually we are getting to a subject which I would like to talk to you about. And that was if you had an profound, the most powerful experience, art experience, if you had that in life, it would be interesting to hear about. Do you have? Do you remember any occasion or?
Yeah, so we were talking about this a little bit before. I think that I've had situations with literature that have been very profound and made me want to write in a certain way, but I think those are very esoteric and maybe hard to pinpoint. But one experience I can say that was very powerful for me as an present art form was I was actually volunteering when I was in my 20s at the film festival, the Midnight Sun Film Festival in Finland. And I was there in the summertime, and it was a beautiful film festival. And I saw for the first time a silent film accompanied by an orchestra playing. Has anyone seen this? Has anyone seen a silent film with a live orchestra playing? I've never seen it before, and it was outside. It was evening, but of course, because the light there, it was still light out. And I remember being so blown away by all these people creating art, not using words, because that's what I do, right, in my profession. I just using words. And here it was a silent film with no words and music giving the language to it. And that was a very profound experience for me.
How did it affect you? Did it make something to you?
Well, made me think a little bit about the rhythm, because it wasn't using words. I was thinking how the rhythm of language can work, even if you're not using words. And it made me think about, this is what you do as a writer. You think about sentences, you think about paragraphs, maybe think about the rhythm of sentences. And it just was a very stark memory to me of what, how overwhelming it felt. This like this way of like, oh, this is how this can work without words. And so that was a very powerful experience.
Idunn,
Um,
fram.
I can't think of like a moment specifically, but I think what I thought of was sort of the process of learning to love to perform. I had a teacher, Bill Vandersloot, who told me that all you can do is sort of present what you have in that moment. It doesn't matter if you could have done better next week or yesterday or whatever. And so just this feeling of going on stage and just doing whatever you can in that moment, and whatever happens. And I don't know, something like about that just made me like, I really love performing now. I really love to be forced to sort of be in the moment and have to be like present. And I think before I used to have a lot of anxiety because I felt like it was sort of out of my control, or like it needed to be a certain way. But there's something really nice. I think the nice thing about live music is that anything can happen.
And that did affect you in a positive way.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, to grow, be more mature in your choices. And
Or just now, I just love performing. So
Yeah,
I just
yeah.
want to perform as much as I can. Yeah.
no, why I asked you about this is because sometimes these experiences could be game-changing, even life-changing. So if you have, maybe you have such experiences yourself, maybe you can put them in a little box and remember them for long, because that was such a good memory that only did me good and well. So sometimes you need to collect these because we also have bad experiences, right? I have some strong experiences. One of the most strong was actually a theater play in Stockholm. I was totally knocked out. It was a Shakespeare play on a really underground theater in Stockholm. I was knocked out. It took me a week to recover from that experience.
Do you remember which play it was?
It was Richard III. Yeah, and the way they did it was with such humor, such speed, it was wow. It was like opening a box for me. And sometimes you talk about open this Pandora's box. Not always good things in the Pandora's box, but you can also use it in a positive manner, that sometimes you just open a box and there's another box and there's another box and there's another box. And you're very happy you opened that first box. And for me, it was a game changer looking at life and culture, because it was, ooh, could they do this on a stage? Wow. And it was like just a year before I started studying theology. And then I'm thinking about course we had when we're talking about the ancient Greek theater, the Greek drama. You know, it was both religious and performance, choir, theater on the same stage at the same time. So the culture and the cult was undivided. And I read a novel about this, and the writer, I don't remember his name, he said, art and the cult are two indivisible siblings, but they move away sometimes from each other. And then they meet, and then they go away. And that's the way I look to my both calling myself for the drama, the theater, and the church. It's like these two siblings are talking to each other. And I do love the art world, the music, the dance, literature, because I think the art culture is more skilled and trained to show us how we are as human beings, showing maybe the dirty, awful things in us and make it to art. And the church on its side is really skilled of getting the good things in nature, the light, the positive things, so skilled to make that visible for us and important for us. But I think these two sides is needed. Like Jung, he called it, we have a shadow in ourselves. We have our public face, nice, but we also have a shadow. So art makes us complete. Art and religion for me is, you know what I mean? Yeah. My English is not always following me, but I need, because I think art is better, more skilled to explore my human nature and all my misery and all my, and I think churches, we don't take the word better, but are more skilled and trained to do that. For me, I need both sides. So that's why I'm such a fan of music, literature, and dance. And sorry, Nikisha couldn't be here today, because dance without no words could tell such a story. So profound, game-changing sometimes. And you cannot put it into words. So that was actually the last topic. It wasn't meaning I was talking so much.
Then I want to know, have you seen any plays?
Have you seen any plays here yet? I know you were only able to finally move here in December, but have you been able to go to the theater yet, or it has not been open because of?
Yeah, I've been to theater once here, and it was at the this wonderful play, Barbara, you know it, about San Francisco at the Forge, what the club called, not Focacci, no. What?
Fugazi?
Yeah. So they make a play about San Francisco. You have seen it, Barbara?
Yeah.
And it was really a profound experience. It was more from the joyful side. It was humor, and it was great artistry. Yeah.
It's like a cabaret.
It is like a cabaret.
Do you still act? Or do you see yourself acting again?
Yeah, I do act. You just go to our website and see our Easter play. You see me crucify Jesus. Why not? So yeah, I do still act, and I need to do that. So yeah, but not in the way I did before. But I love to do things we do with the people in the church as well, and yeah, it gets me to the last question, one of the two last. Is there a spiritual dimension in art and music? What do you think? And could you put it into words? Is it possible? Do you have any thoughts about a spiritual dimension? I think we touched the subject already, but do you think about your work that it has a spiritual dimension? A free interpretation of spiritual, but like, you follow me?
Yeah.
You want to say something?
I'll say something.
Yeah, I don't know if it's spiritual, but my interpretation of spiritual is something that kind of takes on its own. You don't know where it's coming from. It's just somehow something takes hold of you. And I think that a lot of writers I know who don't use the word spiritual say that they may use basketball analogies, like when you're playing really well, you're in the zone. And I think that sometimes with writing or with art, you feel like you're in the zone, or you feel like there's a spiritual feeling going on where you are, writing. I don't even know what I'm going to write next, but I'm just writing and writing and writing. And I feel for me, a spiritual, what I interpret to be spiritual, because it's not an intellectual, it's not something I'm thinking about. It's just something that comes out of me. So that's my interpretation of that. And that's actually, as a writer, what you want to get to. You want to just feel like you're just writing stuff subconsciously that you're not aware of. And that's what you strive to get to. Not the days when you're just thinking, oh my gosh, what should I write? But when you feel, words speaking to you.
I think about the word inspiration, of course,
Yeah.
also. Yeah, Idunn.
Oh, no,
No,
okay.
no, when I say it's a spiritual dimension, you can also think about inspiration, like it's a metaphysical thing happening when you train or perform. Or, do you reflect over that?
Yeah, I think just that something can be meaningful for me, like something I perform, and then it can touch someone else, maybe in a totally different way than I thought, which is why I love, music with words, music without words, I think can touch different people in different ways, so you can sort of communicate a lot of things without saying them, and I think that can be a spiritual thing for both the performer and the person listening.
Yeah, I think we touched the subject, and for me, you cannot put it into words actually. And sometimes in church we are talking too much and put everything in words, but my interpretation, we don't know exactly the whole nature of God and the Word and the cosmos and everything, but we try to talk about it. And I was actually thinking about reading a poem myself. Maybe I will end it with that, because this program is getting to a close, and we take a very important question, but for you, not metaphysical at all, very pragmatic. How is it to work as a cultural worker here in the Bay Area, California? Challenges, possibilities, the recent COVID pandemic. Could you say something to us about the pros and cons being a cultural worker in the US? Who will start?
I'll start, because I have a question for you about performances during COVID and how that affected your relationship with your work. But for me, COVID doesn't affect writing, really. You're by yourself anyway, and then you're by yourself even more during COVID. But I will say that I find writing in San Francisco is very different from when I lived in New York, for example. I find that it's very supportive, like the writers here are very supportive of one another. And I think it's just a community of support for culture and your fellow writers, not a competitiveness between everybody, but just a very encouraging one. And so I find that San Francisco to be a very good place for that. But I'm really curious if whether you were able to perform during COVID or if everything was on Zoom and how that was for you.
Yeah, so I was in school still, and I'm still in school, but I had to do some Zoom performances during my school, and I don't really love that, because I don't think they're very fun to watch, and I don't think they're very fun to do always. But I started just playing in the streets with some friends. We started the string trio, and that was surprisingly really meaningful, because it made me realize how much people missed music, and people gave us a lot of really positive feedback for just standing in the street and playing, and a lot of people said that they so missed going to the symphony and things like that. And then we started playing in some bars and restaurants and things like that too, and it was I look back on it as a positive time, even though of course I missed different performances.
Perform in the street, where would you perform?
A lot in Hayes Valley, it's around their school. It's where I used to live. But over in different places. We played in like the Ferry Building, Farmers Market, just little places around there.
So the pandemic couldn't kill the culture. Period. Good. Sometimes you need to fight for your skills and for your be able, because to be a culture worker probably is the most unsecure work you could have. I have so many friends in Sweden are actors, painters, and everything, but they work in a restaurant or they work in the hospital, or so it's not so easy to live on your art. But you're still on a scholarship, but I imagine that it will be a harsh reality. Maybe not for you because you're such a star. Stupid
Well,
questions.
I don't know. I think it will definitely be a big change to not have this frame, you know, because I'm going into sort of freelancing and auditioning, and it's a lot less stable. So I think it will definitely be a challenge. But I'm excited for a new challenge because I've been in school and had that kind of challenge for a very long time now. So scary but exciting, I think.
Yeah, and now we've done our hour, and you are now, there's a possibility for you to, if you have a question or a thought, and Christine will help you with the microphone to ask the panel or me, or just say something. So Margot or Carl, you want to say something? And the slot for the microphone is not so long.
Anyway, so actually what you were just saying is my question is a little bit of a three-part question. The first is what made you decide to come to the United States? Which of the places you've lived you've liked the most here, and what will be doing, what your plan is to do once you're finished school?
I'll try to speak loudly enough. Should I? Okay, I'll use the microphone. I'm not very loud for a speaker.
Next time we will have a longer slot. Okay,
my family actually moved to Amman, Jordan when I was 14. I went to an American school, and so I had an American violin teacher, and I don't know, it seemed interesting. I wanted to try something new, I guess, and I came here to study, and I would say San Francisco is my favorite place that I've lived. Yeah, it's a great city.
What's your question for Idunn? Yeah. And Carl had a question here as well.
To the mic.
Okay, vi får prata nära.
Väldigt jättebra. So I know you have a project, Valencia, art range for young people, creative writing. Can you tell us more about that? It sounds very interesting.
Yeah, sure.
So 826 Valencia started actually 20 years ago this April. So we just celebrated our 20th year. And it's a center that's provides free one-on-one tutoring for students in San Francisco. So the students will come after school and get tutoring, especially if they, well, this is what I love about it, actually. They go there if they need extra help, like extra tutoring for their subject, or maybe they're an ESL learner, English as a second language learner, and need help keeping up with their classes. And then also some kids go there when they just are very passionate about writing, but they don't have any place else to go. They want to write a novel and they're 15 and they need some guidance. So everything there is free. It's all, we believe in one-on-one, sitting next to your tutor without a computer, just a pencil. And the idea is to provide, especially just provide support for teachers, especially since the classrooms are getting so much bigger and the teachers can't always find the time to sit down one-on-one with the students. No fault of their own, but they have so many other things to do. And administrative work. But and so a lot of teachers come to us asking for help with their students as well. So but you should come by. There's a center on Valencia, now there's one in the Tenderloin, and there's a third one as well.
Thank you. Any more? Yeah, Mimi here has.
And thank you for that, because my children also benefited from that. That they come out to the schools as well.
Yeah.
But my question was, what music do you listen to when you wrote that book? What kept playing your thing?
Really use this microphone now.
No, just go for the computer.
Oh, sorry. That'd be very loud. When I wrote this book, I didn't even listen to that much 80s music. Surprisingly, I actually started listening to an album by Florence and the Machine, this band that I like a lot. Do you know? And I had good luck one day, and then I got very superstitious, and that's all I could listen to was that same album over and over again the whole time. That was. Thank you for that question.
Any more thoughts or questions from our lovely audience? Yeah, Margot has some.
For Vendela, do your books have a theme, like you'd say Henny Mankell, he writes detective novels? Is there any running theme through your books or not?
That's a good question.
This is like the opposite of a jump rope over here. So going over it, so over your head. It's funny. My theme, my books is not deliberate. They're all literary fiction is the category that they're shelved in at the bookstores. But I'm always interested in women's stories, and usually women at points of transition in their lives, and usually women are going to suffer. I've noticed the theme now. I have written 6 books, women who have suffered something and are making new choices. So that's kind of ends up being the theme. And I always vow I'm going to write a book about men or a man or something different, and then it ends up not being about that. Thank you for the question.
Yeah. So thank you so much.
Where's the poem we were reading?
Okay, do you want me to read it?
Yeah.
Okay. It's in Swedish. This is a poem by Ekelöf. He's a Swedish poet, Gunnar Ekelöf. And this is one of the poems that I've had in my box over positive memories. So I read it for you in Swedish. It's from a collection called Färjesång, and the poem is named Tag och skriv. And this is just a short episode. Liv är kontrasternas möte. Liv är ingendera parten. Liv är varken dag eller natt, men gryning och skymning. Liv är varken ett ont eller ett gott. Det är mälden mellan stenarna. Liv är inte drakens och riddarens kamp. Det är jungfrun. Och ingen ska komma till mig med drakens hunger och ondska. Och ingen ska komma till mig med riddarens ädelmod. Fast sagorna ljuger så skönt. Och ingen ska komma till mig med jungfruns förtröstan och hopp. Ty kampen varar för evigt. Och den som ska sätta livet till är inte draken och inte riddaren, men alltid jungfrun. That was Gunnar Ekelöf. Did you follow it, Vendela?
Absolutely.
I have it in English, but it's not.
It sounds very good in Swedish.
So, yeah, I think for me, this poem came to me when we were talking about making this webinar, even, and because it's all what we are talking about. I think it's something between culture. You cannot define it. Religion, you cannot define it. It's just some blur there, but it affects us. And this poem is one of my favorites, and I have several other ones, maybe for another webinar. So I'm so grateful that you're here in the Swedish Norwegian Church and Vendela Vida. A big hand for Vendela. And for Idunn Lohne.